This is the Living Fearless Today podcast, a show that helps men like you and me who are struggling to get unstuck and overcome fear to live confidently and courageously. I'm your host and transformation coach, Mike Forrester, helping you create the change you want now. Join me as I interview men who've conquered their challenges and soared to success as they spill their secrets on how they live fearless today. Well, hello and welcome back, my friend. This week, Alan Dumonceau is joining me to just have an amazing time. So Alan had me as a guest on his show, the Revolutionary Man podcast, short while back. And we just had such a great time talking, and I love his story. And so wanted to bring him on and have you hear from him and be encouraged by his story, his journey, and where he's at now. So Alan, how are you doing today, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on the show. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Hey, my pleasure, man. I'm glad to have you on here. Now, I did skip one thing. I got excited about jumping in and talking. But so you're a former culinary Olympian. And until you and I met, I didn't even know that was a thing. And then as we started talking, I was like, this is stellar. So you're a former culinary Olympian. And then we were also talking about your program because you're the founder of the Awakened Man program. So you've got the podcast, Revolutionary Man podcast, and then you've got the program and then the culinary Olympian, aspect of your story. And it was just so cool. I mean, I love sitting there talking. We were, talking through food and about men. It was like, man, we're never going to get off. Man, it's great to have you on here, Alan. Let's kick it off if we can. Where are you today on the business side of life? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, business, the Awakened Man program, and we're really going through another reiteration of things. I just find that over the last 2 or 3 years, I really started this whole program just prior to the pandemic hitting, because I found there was a need for it. And today we're just getting ready to go back to in-person meetings. So we're pivoting a little bit from online stuff. So we'll continue to have an online component. I have the Awakened Man Training Academy, where all of our training resides in, and we're also reintroducing a Hero's Quest program, which is all about helping guys really dive into understanding what their why is, find a true purpose, and then I work with them for a 90-day period, and we really dive into all aspects of their life. So I'm excited about that because we're getting back together in person. And not that online isn't a bad way to get to reach people and to speak to people, but there's a different dynamic when you're in the room and you get an opportunity to work with guys, one-on-one. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And we're just looking at expanding our marketing aspect as well. So lots of stuff going on here as the Awakened Man starts to flourish.
Yeah, very cool. And what about on the personal side of life? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, you know what? Personally, I just had such a, over the last 5 or 6 years, especially, we've had such a shift in my marriage. If I just don't mind, I'll just dial back just a little bit. So in my early days, in my 20s, I actually married my high school sweetheart. So at one point in my life, half of my life was spent with this individual. And we had 2 children together, and grateful for everything that we had. But when my life started to fall apart in my 30s, when the vision I had, the dream I had that we were going to grow old together, and we'd have matching his and her walking sticks, and the whole piece, right? Like, this is just this fairy tale idea of what I thought life was going to become. And when that didn't transpire, it was really a pivotal area in my life, because I went to a really deep depression for about 2+ years. I didn't hardly see my kids. I felt so ashamed over what had happened. I ended up by claiming bankruptcy. I lost everything, not just my family and my kids, but I lost myself. And it's when during about a year into that I met my current wife, and she was just there as a support person. There wasn't anything physical at the time. It was just there as a support person, and it took a few years for things to take off. And so I'll fast forward where, really over that 20-year span, I was just a self-help nut. I read everything. I bought anything I could get my hands on that had to do with self-help. But what I found is that while intellectually I understood what to do, as a practitioner, I wasn't very good at it. And so my life, as you talked about there, being so successful with, I felt my professional career was really successful. I'm a chef. I always wanted to be one. I had visions of being like Jack Tripper and, having my own restaurant, living with a couple of girls, all this, have lots of fun. And when that didn't transpire, but I was able to compete in a culinary Olympics and, win some medals. And I really felt like I had the cat by the tail, right? But the challenge is that those are superficial things, right? It was all external stuff. It's rewards. It's all of this. And I just didn't feel fulfilled. And so about 6 years ago, my father-in-law passed away. No, not quite 6 years. Yeah, about 6 years ago, he passed away now. And I would say that he was like my best friend. Like, we did everything together. He had 2 daughters, and he just never had that son, and I was that son. And we'd go. He's a big Yankees fan, so we'd go to Minneapolis. I live in Canada, about 8 hours away from Minneapolis. So whenever the Yankees are coming to town, we'd make the road trip for the weekend, and we'd go watch the Yanks play. And so when he passed, I really felt there was this void again, and I had this loss of direction. And when that occurred, I found that there wasn't anywhere for me as a guy to go. Like, I was dealing with grief. I felt that I still hadn't really processed and dealt with my first marriage breakup. And in that piece, as I was trying to recover, I just about lost my current marriage because I wasn't dealing well with what was going on with us as a couple. And so when I found that there was nowhere for men to go, because let's face it, whereas guys, we're challenged, right? We don't always want to open up and share. Like, it's just really difficult. And especially if you're in a room of mixed company. And what I mean by that is there's men and women in the room. And it's tough enough to share with your best buddy, let alone a bunch of strangers. And so when that didn't exist, I felt that there was a void, and I needed to do something. I needed to do this work. And I think there's a saying that says, we teach, or we do the work that we need for ourselves first. And so that's why I wanted to create the Awakened Man. And it really is, from a personal level, I've seen such a transformation in my marriage with my wife and I. And, Kimmy she's just such a huge supporter now, and has always been a big supporter. I shouldn't say now, has always been a big supporter, but even more so now, because she sees a transformation. I went from being the doormat in our relationship, where I just felt that because of what happened in my first marriage, that if I would try to fight, but not very hard, for fear of, I don't want to be alone again and lose everything. And I had to learn and go through that process to understand that it's okay to speak up, to learn how to communicate and still be present and powerful, and hold space for her so that she can have that as well. And I just think that because of her strength, that allowed me to really rise to get my strength to where it needs to be.
Yeah. It's one that I've experienced it as well, where when I healed, I created space for my wife to then grow. And it's really interesting the way that, our healing, both as husbands, as fathers, at the core as men, will create a space for our wife, our children, family and friends around us to really expand, like in a way that I never anticipated. I know that. You had touched upon that you were, consuming self-help books and resources, but not really implementing them successfully. What did you see that changed from where you were initially using them and not creating that traction to now, where there's the success with the reading and then bringing it about into your life. What's the difference? What changed there?
Yeah, great question, Mike. The big change is that while I still consume, countless amount of material, today I put it into an action plan. So if I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to take a program, the commitment I make to myself today is I want to implement at least one strategy that I'm getting from this into my daily life. And how does that look? And so I started to do that. I started to incorporate some things. So just for example, one of the things that I found that was really troublesome is that when somebody would ask, so why are you doing this? Like, why do you do all this work? And I had a hard time answering why. And when I couldn't answer it, that's when I realized that how much in our lives do we just do things from rote, or we're a bit like the zombie. And so one of the things that I worked on was really worked on what my purpose is in life and what is my intent. And so I'm pretty consistent with it. I won't say that I'm perfect and I do it every day, but as best as I can, in part of my morning routine now. Another thing that I developed from listening to some stuff with, the 5 a.m. club with Robin Sharma is having some sort of a morning ritual that'll include some meditation, a little bit of exercise, and setting an intention for what I'm wanting to accomplish. And then as soon as I started making those small shifts, right, then I could see difference, but so could my wife, and so could people who are close enough to me can see things. And I think that's the big difference. It wasn't just like, well, I plowed through this book, and now it's time to. And I would say that I'm a fairly slow reader, so I was just happy that I got through the book. Right on. Another one I nailed down, but I wasn't taking anything from it. I wasn't making notes. I didn't, build, little book reports for myself. And so that was, I would say, was probably the most profound change, is that if I'm going to read something, I'm reading it now with intent. If I want to take a course, I'm going to take it with intent. I may not apply everything in it, but I want to apply something that really resonates with me and make that note. And that's really how I started to, when I noticed that, I go, well, you know what, I'm doing this today now. I have morning routine. I set up a weekly schedule. I have intent on what I'm trying to get done in the week. And one of the things that I still struggle with a little bit is being more consistent with journaling, but I introduced some journaling as well. So just anything to help challenge and push that growth mindset. Because I think for me, falling backwards and not, I'm 57 now. I'm going, okay, it's time to, at this stage in my life, how can I give back, and how can I make a more impact, not just for others, but for myself and for my family.
Yeah. And I think the amazing thing is being at this stage of life, do you feel more alive and more energized, connected, focused than you did, say, in your 30s or 40s? Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, 100% I would. And I think the reason for that is that because there is a depth of purpose in there. Whereas before it was about, that really diving into that masculine energy of, do, get things done, go. And I'm an A-type personality as well. So like, I just get stuff done, but there was no depth to it. It was just going hard. And now as I'm a little bit older, I want to do things with purpose and intent. And if I'm going to do something, then I want to, come from it from that perspective. And so it's a more sustaining experience today than more fulfilling than it was in my 20s and my 30s. Like, it was, don't get me wrong, it was great walking across the stage and getting a couple of silver medals that, there's thousands. And you got to remember, this was in the early 90s. So this wasn't when chefing was cool, right? There was no food TV, there was no Bobby Flay, like none of that stuff existed. So it wasn't necessarily cool to be a chef like it is today. So, while that was a goal to achieve, but it didn't provide depth and meaning. And so I use it, yes, in my bio and that, because it's a unique thing. Like, not too many guys here that hey, that even exists, right? Like we talked about
Right.
in our podcast. So, but I did learn a lot from it. It's just that today, the depth of when I do something is it has to have meaning and purpose before I'm willing to commit.
Now, how did you get to setting the goal to be a culinary Olympian? I mean, like you said, it wasn't the popular thing. How did that come about for you to set on that path?
Well, I always enjoyed cooking. And so, in my early, as a young guy, my mom was a great cook, and I enjoyed, playing around in the kitchen with her. And when I went, so I always say that I don't know, maybe you remember these guys, but there used to be Graham Kerr. Remember him, the Galloping Gourmet? Mm-mm. Remember that TV show? Okay, so there used to be out in the US. So here's a history lesson for folks. You can go Google this when we're done. Well, there used to be a cooking show in the afternoon. It was called the Galloping Gourmet. His name is Graham Kerr, and he would cook all these classic French dishes, and just like Chateaubriand, like all the like classic stuff. And I'd come home from school and I'd watch that, and I go, that is so cool. And he would finish the show and he'd sit down. He always had a guest from the audience, and they always have beautiful looking dinner and a glass of wine. Mm. And then in Canada here, there was an actor. His name was Bruno Drusi, and he was on a TV show. He had his culinary show. So there'd be Galloping Gourmet, and then right after that, this other one would come on. I can't remember the name of it today. But Bruno's glass of wine was even bigger, right? It was just, I thought, like, this just looks like so much fun. They're spending time in the kitchen, and I just wanted to do that. So when I got into culinary school, my focus with my chef instructor was I wanted to be in a kitchen where guys at the time, lots of guys, passionate about food, passionate about, teaching and working with young culinarians. And so he found me a job with just that individual, who ended up by truly being my mentor. And he was just getting started in his career with the Manitoba culinary teams where I'm from, and competing. And it just so happened in our small little province, the preeminent master chef in Canada at the time also worked out of here, and he was on Team Canada. So I got immersed into this environment of like these passionate professional guys, and it was just the experience. I have goosebumps just talking about it today because it's been so long since I've told this story, but it was just so passionate. And I think that's part of also what motivates us as folks, is that when you get into that passion piece of, what really drives you, like it can carry you for a long time. And it did. It carried me for almost 20 years of my career. And so, going to travel to Germany, because the Olympics are in Frankfurt, and meeting all of these chefs from around the world and seeing them. And they were really the catalyst. Like the professional teams, we were regional. The professional teams had what you see today, like Iron Chef. They would have those competitions live, right? And guys are voting on it. Folks are voting on it, and it just gave me such juice to go and really hone my skills as a culinarian, but also in learning how to set yourself up in life and how to do things. So I think I got I'll call them the hard skills from that career. And at the time it was pretty brutal career. What's the guys there? Gordon Ramsay. That was pretty much what my career was like, growing up with chefs, yelling at you and throwing frying pans or whatever. It's just the way it was back then. But you knew how to navigate. I knew how to navigate, and I just really felt that it was a great career. So that's how I fell into it. It started as a young passion, and then I just got really lucky. And I think anyone who's looking for a career, depending on the age of your audience here today, if you find that advocate, that person that's going to stand behind you and encourage you to do things, willing to spend time to teach you how to do things, that that's the universe saying that you're on the path to something here. And maybe it doesn't end up by being a 20-year career. Maybe it's a 2-year experience. But I highly encourage to go into that experience, because you're going to learn so much more than what that thing is. You're going to learn so much about yourself. You're going to learn about life skills. It's just such a great experience.
Now, one thing I know I hear a lot, and you may have as well, is you got to set goals. Goals are the big game changer in life. But you were sharing earlier, you set this goal, you achieved the goal, but yet there was an emptiness inside. What is it that we're not being told that, hey, goals are the way to go. Yes, they are important, but what's the missing component that was like missing from that time in your life, and that you feel is kind of not as talked about as it should be?
Yeah, that's a great question there, Mike. I think the difference and the pivot that happened for me was that while it's great to have goals, what we tend to focus on is that what that result will be. So let's go back to the example of the culinarian, right? And then competing. So I achieved that experience, but what I didn't add into that goal achievement process was how am I going to transform? What happens to Alan when he gets there? Because the challenge is that when we think of goals, we think of it as a to-do list. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then we accomplish that. But along the way, we haven't factored into the transformation that will occur. And so one of the things that I teach and work with men is the question I have them ask themselves when they're setting goals is that when you're done, I want you should be able to complete this sentence. That upon achieving this goal, I am the kind of man who, what does that say after that? And it's not about I'm the kind of man who wins a medal at the Culinary Olympics. I'm the kind of man who, has transformed his passion into purpose, who has found out that he can do more with his skills that he thought he had, that I have a higher level of belief of who I am. And I think it's that piece of it. And you need to spend time with really, what is it that in the end I've accomplished this? And so some visualization, some visioning process I also encourage guys to do is to really holistically look at what's the transformation that achieving this goal is going to accomplish for me. And if you're struggling with it, maybe it's not wrong to go after the goal. There may be something different that you're needing to look at. And so sometimes I look at what is a transformation that I'm looking to have for myself. And if I start from that position first, then goal set, the goals are much more powerful. They're much deeper. But we tend to write down our goals first, right? I'm going to make my, the old Jack Canfield idea, Mark Victor Hansen, write your 100 goals, write your bucket list and make your bucket list. But if there's no meaning and purpose behind it, then it's just a check off list. And so you're not truly growing as an individual. So you can complete the sentence, I'm the kind of man who, whatever that says, you say after that about yourself, those goals will now have more direction, more purposeful direction behind them.
Hi, Coach Mike here. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Living Fearless Today podcast. Man, if you're struggling with your worth, feeling you're not enough, and playing small, honestly, this isn't your lot in life. There is more available to you beyond this podcast to help you uncover your worth, feel respected, be confident, and play bigger in all areas of your life. Grab a time at highcoachmike.com/book a call to set up a complimentary session on where you're at today, who you want to be, and how you can live the life you've been desiring. Again, head on over to highcoachmike.com/book a call and take that first step towards your life transformation. Yeah, it's one of it. It also, I think, gives you that why. And if we haven't yet tapped into our purpose, can give us insight into, what's my purpose? Why am I doing this? And how is this going to, like you talked about, bring about that transformation? Because otherwise it's like, hey, I achieved I succeeded at the Olympics and I have these medals and what? It's like a hanging sentence and you just haven't written it all out. So you had talked about being around all these chefs and it being a male, environment. Did that kind of fill a void for you as well? I know, like, I've had those instances where I was filling like my environment with men who could give that validation, like I was kind of lacking. Was that part of that equation, or was there something different for you in being in a male environment?
Yeah, I think for me it was a little bit different. The environment, what it really filled with me is these guys were, most of them I would say were 5 to 10 years older than I am, and I'm the oldest in my family. And I found that growing up, I was generally the old. All my friends were much young, would be younger, like would be the same age, but they're not the oldest, right? And so they always had big brothers or big sisters. And so I never really had that. And my dad had to work so hard. We grew up pretty poor, and so my dad had to work lots. And these guys hanging around there was kind of like a mix of big brother and father figures for me, and so they were there to help and mentor, but they were also there to, kick you in the butt if, when you weren't paying attention, or, we'd be each given a task. So, our fundraising, obviously we're chefs. So guess what we did? We hosted dinners, and they were all, 8, 9, 10, 11 course dinners. And so you'd have a particular task to perform for that meal. And you could be, okay, you're going to look after the vegetables for the main entree. And of course, you just didn't put a plunk of broccoli spear on it. We were doing carvings and special things, right? And so you would get judged, literally judged on the quality of that workmanship. And so, that's where, again, I was in an environment where I really was challenged to rise up. And I had lots of low self-esteem in my career, and and even in growing up as a man. And so I found that there were many days, when the team would get together, like I was scared. Like for me, that was like the scariest thing, because I just, I like hockey. I don't know if you like hockey, or your listenership knows hockey, right? I kind of felt like I'm that third and fourth line grinder. My mentor, like he was Wayne Gretzky. It was just by accident and fluke, he'd make this beautiful showpieces, beautiful food artwork. And I'm like, man, it'd take me like 3 weeks to come up with that and hone it and get it right. But I felt like I was in such privileged company that I was learning so much. So they were for me, was more of that mentor group to help me grow as an individual. And so I think that was more the experience, I think, for me.
Gotcha. And so when you had received like the silver medals, I mean, that's huge. I'm just sitting back going, wow, I can't even imagine what you had to do to accomplish that, or what kind of pride that would give. You talked about, like the low self confidence.
Yeah.
I know that it's kind of one of those, we'll believe that, hey, if I achieve this, it's going to solve and eradicate the problem that I have with my low self-confidence. Was that what happened, or was that something you still had to work through afterwards? Or what did that look like after you were awarded with the silver medals?
Yeah, you know what? For a short period of time, and I would suggest probably 2 years, that really did elevate my self-confidence, the self-worth, the self-talk. All that piece did elevate, because quite honestly, it opened doors in my career for me. Having that on a resume, I was able to get some positions that other folks weren't able to get. But I found as time went on that became fleeting. In the end, you're still stuck with yourself. And so how many more culinary competitions do I need to enter before Alan's going to feel good about himself? How many other opportunities do I need to go and prove myself to myself about what I define as who I am? And so I found that became fleeting, because the focus, while I accomplished what I wanted to, and I'd learned so much about it, I still left there feeling like that grinder, and not as looking at it as being as important and pivotal place in my life. Because like I said earlier, when I think about it, I go, and I'm looking at you, and I'm looking up to the left a little bit here. You're right. And I have a big, big screen here of picture of all my 2 medals and all that work. That part of my life was so important to me. And now I look at it with more reverence, because it is it is important. And it's the story I was telling myself, the story I continue to tell myself at times about I'm not good enough, or this isn't, it's not important enough. Sure, it's important enough. Why wouldn't it be? And so I can tell myself the negative story, or I can tell myself a story that's much more truer to heart, that there are very few people, maybe a few thousand, that have something like this that they can go back on in the entire world, in a world of 2 billion or whatever we are, billion people. It's very small group of individuals. And so I think once I started to change the perspective of where I was coming from, then that helped shift about the self-worth part of it, the type of story I tell myself. And then that helps, does move into other aspects of our life if we allow ourselves to see that connection. And I think as guys, we're just really compartmentalizing, right? Don't we? Like, I got to keep this part of my life here, and I got to keep this part here. Well, they all bleed into each other at some way, shape, or form. And so how can I take that good stuff and bring it across in other aspects, right?
Yeah. Who we are is like who we show up as within our personal and our professional lives. It's not, hey, I'm really great over here. You may feel more confident at work. That's like where that workaholic aspect goes. But as far as, man, there's still that insecurity that follows you. How did you're 2 years down the road from winning the silver medals. How did you then begin doing that inner work to start removing those voices that are dogging you, that are going, you've got to win this next medal, you don't amount? I mean, those voices and messages that we as guys fight with, that's, just pushing that insecurity button. How did you dig in and start quieting those voices?
Yeah, great question. And that timing is right in and around when my marriage, my first marriage broke apart, because there was such a focus on my career and aspect that I stopped paying attention to my personal life. And, we're having a great conversation here about how personal and professional need to integrate and become both full aspects of who we are. And so that really, I can tell you, this was in the early 90s, mid 90s when it all started to happen. And I got myself a set of Jack Canfield's Self-Esteem and Peak Performance cassettes. Remember the old cassette deck, right? And it was
right after 8 tracks, right?
Right after 8 tracks, buddy. Absolutely. The song would go on to the next track halfway through. Anyways, there'll be people there looking that up. What are these guys talking about? Anyways, I wore that series out because what Jack was really trying to get across is that it's about how we perceive ourselves, and it's the story that we tell ourselves, and the willingness to put ourselves out there. And even though I did that kind of in my culinary career, I always felt protected, and so I always liked the story he told in that series about asking people at the break. He had one individual in there that was, really worried about being embarrassed, right? And I could totally resonate with that. And so he asked this individual at the break, what I want you to do is I want you to go to the nearest 7-Eleven, go in and ask them, where's the nearest 7-Eleven? And so the individual did this, and they came back, and he talked about, so what was your experience with that? I said, well, I kind of felt a little bit embarrassed, but the transformation this individual had was that it's an obvious, of course, I'm standing in 7-Eleven, but why am I feeling embarrassed that I'm asking that question? And so what he was trying to get this individual to understand is that it's the story that we tell ourselves. And guess what? You came back, you're still whole, you're still a complete person. Nothing really changed about you except your perception about who you see yourself as. And when I heard that story, it's just like, I'm so afraid, or we can be so afraid to put ourselves out there and risk. And I think as guys, we've learned that at a very young age. We've learned it from being told, no, you can't do certain things. And then we get told that in our as we're dating and in our marriages, right? How often do we hear, no, honey, you can't do this? And so we get this idea that we're less than because we have all this rejection. And really, it's just a matter of not right now. And how can we reframe what's happening for us? And how can we change our perspective on things? And so that was really that inner work and I continually do that even to this day, is, just talking with you on the podcast, how to, stopping the comparison about, well, boy, Mike's podcast is getting more downloads than my podcast. Well, that's okay. Mike's at a different place and Mike's doing different work. And in the perspective is that I'm coming in to do the work that I'm being called to do. And it's not about downloads. It's not about all this stuff that we make up, we think is important. It's about what it feels like in here for us. And when we're on the right path, then things show up for us, right?
I think what you're saying there is so true, because it's like we can look at other people and how, other men that are taking out their wives to dinner, to vacations, and go, I'm not at that level of success because like Alan has this house and Alan is going to this amazing French restaurant with his wife. And we pile on those false stories, the narratives that just fuel and really reinforce those beliefs, those limited beliefs that we have. From what I've seen, and I'm assuming from what you've seen, it's crippling to people. It's what I know I experienced. Has that been like what you've seen as well?
100%. I think it's the one piece when we have that limiting belief about when we start to describe ourselves and put ourselves in a box where we feel that we can't go outside of that because we're fearful of what exists past at that. We create this limiting belief. And again, that's why I challenge individuals and myself as well. When I'm being fearful and I put myself into a box, what is it that I'm afraid of? And it could be lots of different things. But really, who is it that I want to become? Who is it that I'm aspiring to become? How am I wanting to show up? And am I showing up that way? And it doesn't, let's face it, whenever I talk to folks about life purpose, you can write the really big one and whatever that big purpose is. When I talk about purpose, I mean with purposeful intent. What is it that I'm wanting to show up in today, tomorrow? In 2 years from now, I'm the kind of man who does what? It takes time to build new habits, build that individual. It took 50 plus years to get to where I am today with all the habits, good and bad, that I have, the ones that need adjustings and the other ones that are working fine. So it's going to take time. And it's about being kind enough to ourselves to allow that growth. And if you're in a relationship where you have a supportive spouse and supportive family, it's being able to have those deeper conversations about them, to talk to them about your needs, wants, and desires, and what it is that you're trying to accomplish for the family. And I think you find that when you start to have those, at least I have in my marriage, at the moment that we started having those conversations, things shifted, right? It was no longer a parent-child relationship, because I think for a lot of guys, we get stuck in that in our relationships. It's just, I think, naturally how we're brought up, in my opinion. But I think that when we change that and have a different kind of conversation, a deeper one, then, we're showing up much differently for ourselves and for our family. And then the support changes because it comes from a different perspective. It's not about seeking approval anymore. It's about seeking collaboration. It's about growing and expansion, as opposed to getting a yes or no answer.
So in changing your lack of confidence to now being confident, what are a couple things that made that that transformation, that change from how you see yourself? What are a couple things that brought that about for you, that you would be like, hey, Mike, if you're in this place, I would encourage you to jump into this so that I can bring about that same transformation. What would you lean upon for those?
Yeah, if I was in that position, and there's still opportunities, I think there's different aspects to our lives that we're in that position. But the first thing I would do is really look at the story that I'm telling myself about this situation. And so the moment that I started doing that analysis, well, why am I telling me this story? And it's a root cause analysis, really, is what we do. So they do that in root cause analysis and in project management, right? And so similarly in our personal life, when we can dive in and get down to the 5 whys of going deeper into what's going on. So, well, why am I saying that I'm not a very good podcast host? Well, because I don't have enough repetitions. And so why is it important for me to have what can I do to have a bit more repetitions? Well, I can host more, I can talk more. You start to dive into your piece, but ultimately you're going to come down to is the final piece is really what it means about who you are. And when you get to that final place, then you can ask, is this true? Is this a statement that's true about who I am? And I guarantee you it's going to be most likely not, because we've told ourselves of this, we have this limiting belief in it. We need to, dig it out, right? You gotta excavate that limiting belief to get down to the truth. Is that once I recognize that I am powerful and that I don't need to compare myself to anybody or anything else other than how was I yesterday to where I am today, and what do I aspire to get to become tomorrow. And we stay within that framework. It's amazing how much life around us changes. Like people just notice that you're a different individual because I've focused on it. So if you're going to do anything, I would suggest a bit of a root cause analysis in going through those why questions. And why is it important? Why is this important to me? And if this is true, and what is true about this statement? Because I think you're going to find that most of those statements are going to be untrue, or they're going to have a grain of truth. And what we've done is we've turned that grain into this massive boulder or mountain. And the truth behind that is that's exactly what we've done.
Yeah. We build a story out of one point. And it's like, if I was cooking alongside of you for dinner, it'd be like, how come my broccoli didn't come out like Alan's broccoli? Or, like the truth is, it's like, is that the direction we're going? And okay, what can we learn rather than what can we compare against somebody else? I think is a lot more powerful. And you saw that in the people that were instructing you. You're seeing them and looking at them like, oh my gosh, you did what with this? And that would take me days. Like what you were talking about, it's one of, okay, what can I learn from this instead of what can I use to be more critical of myself?
Yeah. And the big thing there is be willing to ask questions. And I think, again, because we've been so ingrained to be, have a rejection, and we don't want to look foolish. But the challenge really is that because we don't ask those questions, we don't ask, well, how did you do that? And what was that process? Then we stay stuck, because I think the pain of change sometimes is too big. We see that as being this monstrous thing that I can't overcome, when really, I'm a little bit older. It's the pain of regret that's more lingering for me. I want to ask that question. I want to get better at what I'm doing, whatever it is that I'm doing. And so I hope that the day ever comes that we're cooking side by side, that we're asking lots of questions, we're having great conversation, and both our broccolis will be perfect.
Well, if I'm doing anything, it's going to be out on the grill.
Right on, buddy.
That's my therapy and play space is smoking food and barbecue. So
nice.
But I mean, the cool thing is that's another example of like how you can come alongside of somebody and compliment instead of that comparison. So
yes.
And I think when we build community, I don't know if, maybe let me know if this is the way you've done it as well, is it's like looking for different mentors that are gifted in other, like in differing areas, right? I'm not looking for men who are, the finance and health and auto mechanic or, whatever. I'm looking for different men that can be like, hey, you want a great relationship with your wife? this is where, you can improve, Mike. Hey, here's a way, Mike, that you can touch upon your finances to improve the legacy that you're leaving financially for, your wife and your children. So is that kind of the way you do it as well? Or how are you looking for mentors?
Yeah, that is, you've just hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly it. I think the key is that we need multiple mentors, and each mentor doesn't necessarily need to be a life mentor in terms of they're with you for the rest of your life. Like today, it's been 92, 20, 30 years now. I still refer to, my chef as a mentor, but we don't talk as much as we used to, like rarely anymore, because we've moved on and there's other pieces in life. But today I have different mentors for the things that are important for me today. They're the ones that can support me for what I'm trying to accomplish with who I am today. But the nice thing is that once you've built those relationships with these mentors, that they're always somebody you can go back to. And so I highly encourage people to make sure that they stay in touch, with their mentors, because some will be with us for a short time, others are going to be for a long time, but never lose touch with those individuals. And I do men's work, but to me, a mentor can be anybody. I have lots of respect for the women that have come in my life that taught me just as much, if not more, in different aspects of my life, because I needed that perspective. I needed a different shift, right? I wouldn't necessarily go to my chef mentor about relationship questions, right? That's just wasn't why I would go to him. So I think it's important to have these people and create, like you said, creating a community and creating that environment where you have those different aspects that can come in. Because guess what? If you're having created that community, there's probably somebody in that community that needs that help as well. And you've just connected the dots for them. It can be as simple as that, right?
Yeah. And I think the thing to realize is that as much as we may be struggling with our identity, that we're bringing something to the table as well, that there's a life experience that we bring. Just, we're more critical of ourselves in the whole equation. And there's going to be people that are looking to us to be mentors as well. So
100% for sure.
Yeah. Well, Alan, man, thank you, my friend, for joining me and sharing like your insights, your journey, just where you're at and what's going on. How can people reach out to you outside of the podcast here?
Absolutely. They can reach out. The best way to get a hold of me is go to theawakenedman.net. That's the website. That's where you're going to find everything. We have a group mentoring program there with the Band of Brothers as well. You'll find information on the Hero's Quest, which is a one-on-one mentoring program if you want to really dive deep into your work. And so, that'd be the best place to reach out for me. And just want to say thank you so much, Mike, for having me on the podcast. It was a great conversation today.
It's my pleasure, my friend. And it's just one, it's like every time we jump together, talking and going deep and encouraging each other. So I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you so, so much.
You betcha. God bless.
Thanks so much, my friend, for joining me on another episode. If you found the information within the show helpful, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to. It helps raise the show's visibility so other men can join us in breaking free. See you on the next episode, and remember to continue putting yourself out there. Have a great one.